Hello and welcome. My name is Benita Dimely Ross, and I will be the host for this TLC session, Computational Thinking and Curriculum for Higher Education, presented by Dr. Michael Kolodziej. We are excited that you have joined us today to hear Michael's presentation. Please welcome Michael.
Thank you, Benita, and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for making time today to participate in this presentation. Hopefully you will find it informative and interesting. My name is Michael Kolodziej, and I'm the EVP of Learning Design and Innovation at Bridgepoint Education here in San Diego, California. And the topic today is computational thinking for curriculum in higher education. And to start off, I wanted to just share a quick overview of our time today. I'm going to essentially create an argument and then propose a solution for the problem that I've identified in my argument. So we'll start out by talking a little bit about how the world is changing. And then we'll just glance over the idea that new problems will require some new solutions or some new needs. And then I'll make an argument about traditional learning, that this doesn't necessarily meet these new needs. And then ask the question, what can we do? And then hopefully motivate you to begin to start working on the incorporation of these principles into your courses so that we can change the world together. So jumping in, things they are a-changing. And I wanted to provide 3 examples of this from contemporary culture that I think illustrate this idea of computational thinking. One of which is this idea that, you know, I don't know, five or more years ago, if you needed to go somewhere and you didn't have a car, you might call a friend, but you might also call a cab. Nowadays, I don't call either one. I typically call Lyft or Uber. And it has completely changed the way I get around, particularly if I'm out and having a drink or need to be sort of driven. If I have some reason I need to get driven somewhere, whatever it be, on the way to the airport, doesn't matter. This is now my go-to. Another example I think some of you may be familiar with is, you know, you wanted to meet somebody. Again, let's say it was 5 or 10, 15, 20 years ago, you might go to your favorite local neighborhood establishment and bump into people by accident. Nowadays, we have Bumble, we have Tinder, we've got OkCupid. There's a variety of applications that help connect people with similar needs and interests. And then finally, the third one, this idea of money and currency and sort of saving, and you know, needs no introduction, but what is that starting to look like? We're starting to see things like blockchain and Bitcoin take over and disrupt some of the traditional financial systems, slowly at first, but gaining momentum. So these tools, right, these examples really illustrate some things that are sort of prevalent in modern evolution of our culture and our world, one of which is artificial intelligence. So a couple of articles from, you know, recent web search, Microsoft forming a grand army of experts to fight Google, Facebook, and Amazon with artificial intelligence. Stories on how artificial intelligence will change our lives, even robotics, even things like Alexa or Google Home. These technologies are becoming much more integrated into our lives, and as a result, we are going to have a different world that we live in. So an example, lots of going on this particular slide, but the point here is to show you a couple of ways in which an interconnected, artificially intelligent world might look in our lifetime. We might be able to manage air pollution. We might be able to control traffic more efficiently. We might be able to have smart parking systems that tell you where to go find your parking spots so that you don't have to spend time tooling around the parking lot. There are so many ways in which these technologies, which are now established and proven, are going to begin to evolve our world. and already have. There's a name for this interconnectedness, the Internet of Things, which was dubbed in 2009, and essentially talks or is the idea of interconnected web-enabled objects. Couple of predictions based on the Internet of Things. So putting a name to this phenomenon that we're sort of describing. So Accenture, right, says 2/3 of customers will buy technology for their homes by 2019. So that's a Google Home, that's an Alexa, that's that sort of a product, a smart thermostat. By 2020, more than 5 billion people will be connected, not to mention 50 billion things. Cisco says $14.4 trillion of value is up for grabs globally for the Internet of Things. And Gartner says revenue will increase, exceeding 300 billion by 2020. So if we believe these sort of organizations that are very, have been very accurate about predicting things to come in many cases, there are some pretty significant opportunities ahead as well as challenges. So looking at how we're preparing folks for those challenges, there's also some interesting things going on that I think provide context to this particular argument. A couple of articles that I found in a web search not too long ago about the value of a college education, and I think we're seeing more and more questioning of is going and getting a liberal arts degree, for instance, is that preparing folks for the world of the future? And there's some debate going on about it. I think the answer is yes and no, but let's keep rolling. What do our students think? So interestingly, in a recent report, so this was for a couple years ago, 2015, there was a study that was performed by recent college graduates and their first employers, assessing their ability to be proficient in basic categories. And as we can see from the bars on the right-hand side of the screen, the light blue indicates the proficiency level that the students rated themselves at, and the dark blue indicates what the employers rated the students at. And you can see that in general, according to this study at least, we are producing students, graduates, workers that are less prepared than they think they are. And this just isn't Ashford University, this is college in general. So lots of things to consider. One more thing I'll throw in there as setting the scene is, we have had a decrease in enrollment, Bridgepoint, Ashford, Bridgepoint institutions, but there have been decreases in enrollment in colleges across sectors over the last several years, counter-cyclical to the economy, but also potentially some of that sort of attitude of, I don't know if it's worth it, creeping in. We'll see how that pans out. New problems, new needs. So what are these needs? In 2006, this woman, Jeannette Wing, a professor at Carnegie Mellon University at the time, and now with the Microsoft Corporation, published an article in Viewpoint, the journal of the ACM, that basically said she saw, and this was 11 years ago, this tide coming, this innovation of technology with our lives in ways that that just hadn't previously existed. And she made some pretty bold statements. She came up with this idea of computational thinking, so the idea of sort of thinking like a computer and with a computer. And her powerful argument in 2006 was, this is a fundamental skill for everyone and not just computer scientists. And interestingly, it's gained some steam. So just taking a moment to sort of acknowledge what computational thinking is, it's really a collection of computer science knowledge, practices, and attitudes, which can be leveraged in combinations with computers, computational tools and systems to solve complex, often ill-defined problems across multiple domains. So here's a complex, ill-defined problem. How do I find people that want to date me? Well, if I don't know how to use a computer, I probably maybe we'll roll over to my random, local establishment and try to bump into somebody at random. Or I might be able to use algorithms, GPS locators, databases, and front-end web programming to create an environment in which people can not only find me, but find each other, and in the process, create a business or an opportunity around it. So looking at computational thinking, the bottom of this slide shows it's essentially the incidence of search for the term computational thinking starting from 2006 and ending in 2017. And you can see that there have been fluctuations, but the general increase has been high. Starting all the way back with Seymour Papert and Jeannette Wing's article in 2016, ISTE and the Computer Science Teachers Association got together in 2011, came up with an operational definition. In 2010 and 2011, the National Research Council convened a group of computer scientists and educators around the topic. In 2008 through 2016, the AP Computer Science program in the United States education system became computational thinking centric. 2013, it was added to the next generation science standards, on and on. I think in 2016, President Obama at the time mentioned by definition that American students from kindergarten through high school should learn computer science and be equipped with the computational thinking skills they need to be creators in the digital economy. And all this to say that computational thinking, if it is in fact a skill for everyone, and if in fact the world is changing, produces some pretty interesting challenges for us in terms of how do we teach and how do we assess. I'm providing just a couple of examples of assessing computational thinking which has occurred in the K-12 space. In higher education, this has been less sort of prominent, these sorts of assessment techniques, but essentially these typically center around artifacts, around creation of code, around the creation of media, games, and solving real world problems. So traditional learning doesn't cut it. So John Dewey a long time ago said, if we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. And I believe this is true. And you might say, well, we don't teach our students the way we used to in the past, but our classroom hasn't changed that much. And I would argue that underlying most of our sort of assumptions about teaching and learning is this idea that we learn because there is knowledge. It's fixed and discoverable. It's in books, it's on the internet, it's in our instructors' minds, and that it's their job to pass that knowledge on from the expert to the novice. Got a neat little character there of the knowledge just dripping out into the eager student's head. I'm sure we wish it was that easy. And that expertise is noticeable and measurable. Now, what we're discovering with computational thinking is that there's a lot of discovery and knowledge creation to be done, that there are theories, but that your professor probably doesn't know the answer to what is this algorithm going to do to this particular systemic problem. And so learning is more viewed as a construction of knowledge in which the instructor is not necessarily the keeper and the expert that one sort of gains all information from, but as a partner in thinking and in problem solving. I'd like to just illustrate this idea with a case study of a pretty interesting country named Singapore. I had an opportunity to visit in 2015. At that time, they were preparing for their 50-year anniversary as a country. It is a young nation the size of a large city. And essentially in 1965, Malaysia, which Singapore was previously a part of, decided that they weren't interested in supporting and considering Singapore as a part of Malaysia, and that essentially they were on their own. It's an interesting place, Singapore, because of the ethnic sort of diversity that's in the population. There are folks of Indian descent, folks from that are Malay from Malaysia and Chinese, making 3/4. But English is actually the language that is spoken there, which is sort of interesting. And the thing that's even more interesting about Singapore is that Singapore is often in the top 3. Singapore, North Korea, South Korea, Japan, and Finland are typically in the top cluster of performance in terms of students' performance measured on the PISA exam. The PISA exam is an international exam given to students across developed nations. I think the students are 13 or 14 when they take this exam, but it's the same problems that every country gets. And interestingly, Singapore over the last several years has dominated this exam. Top of the list, you can see the mean score on problem solving on this slide: 562 over Korea, 561 over Japan, 552. United States isn't even on the list. England's at 517. So on paper, the Singaporeans have become one of the best, sort of most effective education systems in the country or in the world. And the problem with this is that Singaporeans are still not getting, finger quotes, the right job. So while I had an opportunity to visit Singapore in 2015 as a part of my doctoral studies at Pepperdine in my course on international education, I stumbled across this article about essentially the fact that Singaporeans were becoming the best middle managers that anybody could hope for, and yet still upper level executive management and leadership were being brought in from outside of their country. Sort of fascinating. If they won the school game, how come they didn't win the actual doing things in life game? What can we do about this problem? So I use Singapore as an example of a nation who has taken the traditional school paradigm and brought it to the max at no small cost. So as an aside, students take an exam in elementary school in Singapore that determines their life path. Students study enormous hours. There's stress, there's substance abuse, there's suicide. Parents take time off of work to help their students study. So at no small cost, Singapore has risen to the top of the academic ladder, and yet, again, not succeeding in terms of leadership, creation, and innovation. So what are they doing? Couple of examples here from that trip. This is actually a project for an elementary school class, middle school rather, where students created in a lab type environment video game controllers using the Arduino open source hardware system and programming. These students literally designed as a group, went through iterative process, choosing the project, coming up with various suggestions for a path, and then each student in a pair with another student got to make a functioning video game controller. Now, as much as they would have possibly learned reading about algorithms and current and all of the things that are implicit and explicit to making this project work, the ability to actually make something is fundamentally superior, and also prepares these students not only for remembering content that's related to computer science, but helping them to think about how to use these tools in the real world. Application starts at the beginning, which means that when we're remembering, when we're learning, and when we're understanding, we've got a schema to build on. Arduino, as I mentioned earlier, is it's all over the internet. Arduino. It's an Italian, I think, originally company that for just dollars and some pennies, you can buy these component parts, chips, boards, and make all sorts of interesting creations. Some other things that they're doing in Singapore that's not related to programming hardware really is Scratch, an MIT program where students learn how to build interactive video games and media that they can then share with other students, swap code together, solve problems in communities. It's a pretty exciting model of what computer science looks like in the adult world, but with sort of bumpers on the rails to prevent students from becoming too lost or really getting too frustrated. So they're able to learn in a context that matters to them and in a way that builds their understanding. How can we change what we do? It's tough. So I wanted to just briefly mention the study that was based, or that this talk is based off of, which was my dissertation research at Pepperdine. The problem that we identified rather, was the fact that there really is not a formal, or many even known informal efforts to integrate computational thinking into curriculum for higher education. The purpose of this study was just that, to determine and to help fill the gap in the literature about how do we begin to plan for and execute the integration of real computer problem solving skills into our existing curriculum. And the research question ended up being, how should we integrate CT into curriculum in higher education? I did a modified Delphi study where I convened a panel of experts, and those experts were given a series of statements that they were asked to respond to in a Likert and open forum response box. And through several rounds of iterative discourse, we were able to come to some agreements and disagreements about some of the principles involved in integration of CT in higher education. The 4 types of individuals that I identified for this study that comprised my Delphi panel were researchers in computational thinking, so folks who had a publication in the subject already, experts that apply computational thinking practices, knowledge, and attitudes, so people that are actually doing computational thinking in the real world, type 3 professors of computer science, and type 4 experts in the area of curriculum development in higher education. So these folks, again, our research question, here are the things that we came up with. 1, the panel concluded to the minimum level of acceptable agreement that computational thinking is a critical skill for the 21st century that will not be adequately covered in K-12 education, and is something that should be covered in higher education. So the first thing they sort of came to the consensus on is that this is a higher education problem, though we have not yet really tackled it. The second is that computational thinking is actually best integrated into specific curriculum domains and not offered as a standalone general education course. So compellingly, the participants argued that for a number of reasons, that having a general education course, similar to how we do with critical thinking, how we do with writing, and how we do with some of the other subjects, leaves a little bit to be desired in terms of the depth and complexity that students are able to reach as they go through to their individual courses of study from general education. The third thing that was agreed upon is that faculty in computer science, though not solely responsible for computational thinking, should play a role in collaborating with faculty at in other disciplines at their institution to offer meaningful experience to students over the course of their degree. And so I'm not sure if anyone is aware in our associate faculty pool, but we do have some computer science programs that are on the horizon, some computer science faculty here at Ashford University that are available and possibly interested in collaborating on helping to include computational thinking and subjects across different domains. Finally, the group agreed that the investment on faculty professional development would be necessary, particularly if we were going to take an approach with computational thinking similar to writing across the curriculum, another curriculum initiative, which again took the opposite approach of just general education writing instruction and focuses really on the integration of good writing throughout the degree program. There were a few things that were unresolved, and these I'll go through quickly. One is that non-CS faculty, whether or not they are capable, whether non-computer science faculty are capable of teaching computational thinking is an area of debate. Whether computational thinking is best outside of computer science completely, that's another part of the debate. And really a lot of specific dialogue around the particular disciplines that we had talked about as a part of the study. So moving through these items, I know that this has been a lot of information, and my hope is that this gets us to start to think about the world as it's changing. Not only that, but the types of jobs and tasks and activities that someone will need to be able to master as they are entering this new world. And then finally, and most importantly for us as educators and designers of curriculum and teachers of people, how do we get out of the paradigm of explaining everything we already know to our students, and how do we help them to actually begin to engage in real world problems? How do we get them to build things that work, and how do we get them to do this in a context where we can help them to solve those problems by, again, not being the sage on the stage who just tells all the answers at the back of the book, but really a co-collaborator in creating knowledge and understanding with our students. And with that, I want to leave you with just a final sort of quote from a gentleman named Douglas Rushkoff. He says, "In the emerging and highly programmed landscape ahead, you will either create the software or you will be the software. It's really that simple," he says, "program or be programmed. If you choose the former, you gain access to the control panel of civilization." And my hope is, particularly with Ashford University students and the population that we serve, that we can help them to gain access to that control panel. I want to say thank you for your time today and for listening. I really appreciate your participation and hope that you've gained a lot from our presentation.